Waves crashing behind me, as you can see.
In Korea, we just went through our own horrific incident in Itaewon. In disaster reporting, I mean, what makes good journalism in disaster reporting?
You know, that's such a good question. And first of all, what a traumatic experience Seoul and the nation have been through, and heartbreaking to read about. And so my deepest condolences to everybody who has been witness to that, who suffered through that. And I have been so grateful for the reporting on it, which has informed me about a community I didn't know much about, and certainly have allowed the victims to live in my mind through the stories that have been written. The part that I think has really changed in recent years is how we think about what we now call trauma-centered reporting, where you and I have probably both done stories in our career where our job was to sort of get the family reaction before anybody else did. And that's obviously, being quick with the news is important, but I think these notions about trauma and how you can traumatize people or re-traumatize people in the course of doing this work have become much more prominent. Tactics you should use, tactics you shouldn't use, and just how you talk to somebody who's been through the worst experience of their lives. Some of the survivors in this case.
Covering those kind of horrific incidents, really, those are the times I felt like I don't want to be in this business.
Exactly, and I think every journalist has had that feeling. I do think since you and I were doing that kind of work, the other thing that's changed, something we do at Neiman now that didn't used to happen when I was a Neiman Fellow, is we do trauma training for the journalists, a lot of whom come to their fellowship having covered and witnessed some of the worst things humanity can do, right? And so they're coming. I have journalists there right now from Ukraine and from Russia who've just been through a very bad experience, whose countries continue to go through traumatic experiences, and helping journalists like that process their own experiences, but also learn how to cover these very traumatic moments for their neighbors, for their communities, for their countries, is something we just used to assume, right?
Yeah.
Just like, just go do it. And now I think we're doing a much better job at training people on how to do that.
I'm sure it's a very comprehensive and complicated process, but if you were to take maybe one essence, what is it that the journalists need to keep in mind when covering traumatic events?
I think what you have to do is understand that you are trying to gather information, but you're also allowing people the opportunity to tell a story that may be the most important story they ever lived through in their lives. And I don't mean newspaper story or television story, a personal story, and that you are going to be a compassionate listener, and that you're not going to say things like, I know just how you feel, because you do not. You know, so these kind of pat phrases that you sometimes hear, I know what you're going through. You do not. You're there to learn what someone's going through. You're there to learn about this experience, but they're the expert. You are not. And so to give people to create this space and this time to respectfully ask questions about this trauma, and I'm speaking very specifically of, say, families now, right? Who knows how long it's going to take them to process this horror. That kind of respect, and not the, I'm on deadline, you know, can you please? So we just have to build that into our process.
You're very right about the kind of phrases not to be used. But I think not always, but some of the reasons that they do it is they are on deadline, that they need to get an answer out right away, and an answer that is better than their competitor and will make the headline. And so I think it is sort of journalists under pressure, competing with so many other outlets. And that makes it even more difficult.
I do think, though, and I'm sure you've had this experience, I have done stories in my career, sometimes where I was first, but sometimes where I wasn't, but I was better. And, we did a story once in the Tribune. It was a story about a Rottweiler dog that had attacked a child in a neighborhood and just torn this neighborhood apart, and people taking sides between these families, etc. Our reporters really wanted to talk to the family whose child had been victimized. And no, this family wasn't talking to anybody, and the reporters were showing up at their front porch, calling them. My reporter sat down and she wrote a letter, a handwritten letter, and she dropped the letter at the home and she waited. The story that reporter eventually got was remarkable. The trust she built in that moment by making the choice that she made allowed her to do a story that no one else was able to do. And I think we just have to think about, and it goes to the credibility questions you were asking earlier. We need our community to think of us in a credible way and in a compassionate way, especially around these stories. And I think we have to make choices that are investments in the long term relationship with our communities.
Knowing what you know today and all the concerns, as well as the possibilities of journalism, what would you say to a young student who aspires to be a journalist? Should they maybe pick another career? I mean, what would you say to them?
So I think if you only aspire to it, maybe find something else to do, maybe not. If you, like me, want nothing more in the world than to do this work, then however hard it is, let's figure it out for you. Because this work is so important. It's so necessary. We need good practitioners. We need better and better journalists. And as hard as it is, as challenging as it is, there can still be a phenomenally rewarding career for people in it. And so if somebody comes to me and says, oh, I'm kind of thinking about journalism, you better be more than just thinking about it. Do you really want this? And it's probably true of other careers too, that it is challenging and it can be too hard if just kind of wanting it or just thinking about it is all you feel. But I'm sure you felt this way at an early point in your career. I didn't want to do anything else. Journalism was the love of my life. And so there were challenges then. The challenges are different and I think bigger now. But people are still making it work. And if anyone, by the way, is listening to this and feels that way, send me an email. I am happy to talk to you about this. We need you.
I know. I'm not really sure if I, knowing what I now say about journalism today, I would make the plunge. It's so hard.
Do you wish you would have done something else?
No, I think probably I would do it again.
Yeah.
But today I'm not sure I would have come out the same. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a different animal.
It's different, but does it make it any less worthwhile? Again, those sort of central fundamental skills and goals we were talking about, they're still so important. So if you care about the world, if you care about your community, if you care about democracy, pick a thing you care about. If you do and you think journalism can help make that better, it's an amazing way to spend your life.
That is true. And on that very hopeful note, thank you for joining us this week on The Globalist.
Thank you.
And for me, that's it for this week. I'll be back next week with another globalist who helped put Korea on the map. Sunjae out.